You know that specific moment when someone at the table, a colleague, a friend, a family member, mentions that they're a month behind on something, or that a car repair wiped out everything they had saved, or that they're not sure how they'd manage if the job disappeared tomorrow? And you listen. You don't say anything particularly useful. You don't offer advice that wasn't asked for. But somewhere in the back of your mind, a number surfaces quietly. The one sitting in an account that exists for exactly this kind of conversation. The one that represents 6 months of everything. Rent, food, bills, the ordinary cost of a life, continuing without interruption. Not invested. Not working hard somewhere. Just there. Available. Untouched for months, possibly years, because nothing has yet required it. While across the table, someone is trying to remember if there's anything left in the account before the next paycheck arrives. Here is what almost nobody calculates about financial emergencies. They do not announce themselves. The car breaks down on a Tuesday. The medical bill arrives without warning. The company announces restructuring on a Wednesday afternoon, and by Thursday, the calendar is suddenly, unexpectedly, completely open. Emergencies are rarely expensive because of the bill itself. They become expensive because they arrive when you have no time to choose, when every decision that follows is made, not from calm calculation, but from urgency, from whatever is available, from whatever can be liquidated, borrowed, or delayed until something changes. The Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances found that roughly 40% of Americans could not cover an unexpected expense of $400 without borrowing, selling something, or going without something else entirely. $400. Not $4,000, not the cost of a serious emergency, the cost of a car repair, a dental visit, a broken appliance on an inconvenient week. The system is built around this gap. Credit cards, payday loans, buy now, pay later. All of it exists precisely because the space between an unexpected expense and the money to cover it is, for most people, a space that someone else is willing to fill at a price. And the price is never just the interest. It is also the decisions made quickly, under pressure, from a position of limited options, decisions that often cost far more than the original emergency, compounding quietly for months or years after the crisis itself has passed. Nobody explains this gap to you when you open your first bank account. You only meet it later, in the specific arithmetic of a bad week, when every decision carries a cost you hadn't planned for and didn't have time to think clearly about. There is a name for why 6 months in the bank feels different from 6 months invested somewhere else. Psychologists call it loss aversion. Research by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed that people feel the pain of losing something roughly twice as intensely as they feel the pleasure of gaining the equivalent. The fear of losing $1 is, neurologically, about twice as powerful as the hope of gaining one. An emergency fund is not an investment. It is not optimized for returns. It is optimized for the specific psychological function of removing the worst version of loss from the table entirely. The loss of stability, of continuity, of the ability to keep a life running while something difficult is being resolved. The person who has 6 months in the bank is not making a financial decision. They are making a psychological one, buying the specific, quiet confidence of knowing that the worst plausible disruption to ordinary life has already been funded. But the psychology only explains part of why it feels so difficult to start. There is a second force, the one that makes keeping 6 months liquid feel almost irresponsible to some people. For years, the cultural message has been the same. Money sitting in a savings account is money not working. Every dollar earning less than inflation is a dollar slowly losing value. The financially sophisticated person invests aggressively, tolerates risk, keeps minimal liquidity, and puts everything else to work. Keeping 6 months in cash is not financially naive. It is a deliberate choice to pay a small and known cost, below market returns on 6 months of expenses, in exchange for a large and specific benefit: the ability to make every other financial decision from a position of stability rather than urgency. And the numbers confirm what the calm already knew. The Federal Reserve data shows that households without an adequate emergency fund are significantly more likely to carry high-interest debt, liquidate retirement savings early, and make financial decisions under time pressure that cost far more than the return they gave up by keeping the money liquid. 3 forces. A brain wired to feel loss twice as sharply as gain, making liquidity feel like protection rather than waste. A culture that calls caution timidity. And a number, every crisis, quietly proving that the people who kept it liquid were right to keep it there. It was there the month the job ended. Not dramatically, not bitterly, just suddenly and without enough notice. And the first thought was not panic, but a quiet, almost calm arithmetic. 6 months, give or take, before any of the real decisions needed to be made under pressure. Not 6 months of luxury, 6 months of exactly the same life, continuing exactly as it had been, while something better was found, without urgency rewriting the terms. It was there the afternoon the medical bill arrived, the kind with a total that takes a moment to fully register. And the only real question was which account to move the money from, not whether it existed or how long it would take to find. It was there the conversation where someone asked, with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, why so much was sitting in a low-interest account when it could be working harder somewhere else. And the answer, offered without defensiveness, was simply, because I sleep better this way. And the conversation moved on, the way conversations do when an answer is both honest and complete. It was there the specific morning of a global economic shock, watching the news, watching the numbers, watching colleagues make frantic calls to financial advisors about portfolios that had lost 20, 30% in a matter of days, and feeling, for the first time with complete clarity, that the account sitting quietly in a savings institution had not lost a single dollar overnight, and would not, regardless of what the market decided to do next. It was there in the specific, quiet freedom of a job negotiation that didn't need to end. In agreement, the ability to walk away from terms that weren't right, not because the position was strong in any dramatic sense, but because 6 months of continuity meant the decision didn't have to be made from hunger. These are not people who earn significantly more than everyone else. Most of them built this number slowly, over years, by moving a consistent amount before anything else happened to it every single month, and then leaving it alone through every market cycle, every tempting opportunity, every moment when it would have been easy to justify using it for something that was not an emergency. They are the person who, asked why they don't invest that money instead, gives a distinction instead of a defense. Something close to this: that account isn't for returns. It's for the version of me that might need to make a difficult decision without being desperate. Those are 2 different things. That is not someone who doesn't understand investing. That is someone who understood, early enough, that the cost of making a financial decision from a position of urgency is almost always higher than the return they gave up by keeping 6 months liquid. They do not check that account obsessively. They do not celebrate its existence or mention it at dinner. They simply know it is there, the way someone knows where the fire extinguisher is without thinking about it daily. And that knowledge changes every other financial decision they make from a position of calm rather than calculation. And the very next time someone asks why they keep that much sitting quietly in cash, that answer was already decided a very long time ago and has not changed since. Now, finally, the objection. 6 months is too conservative. That money is losing value to inflation. You'd be better off investing it and keeping less in reserve. This is not about people who are still building toward that number. Getting there takes time, and the direction matters more than the distance. If that's where you are, nothing here is meant to make a work in progress feel like failure. It isn't one. This is about people who built it and what that number actually protects. And the cost carries less weight than the objection assumes. 6 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account earns a real and measurable return. Not zero, not trivial. The gap between that and a more aggressive allocation is real, but it is a known, chosen, fixed cost. Not a risk, not a gamble. A price paid for a specific thing. The ability to make every financial decision from a position of stability. The people whose emergency funds were invested in 2008 or in early 2020 discovered that the return they optimized for disappeared precisely when the emergency arrived. The people who always have 6 months in the bank are not being financially timid. They are simply refusing to let a future emergency be solved by whatever the market happens to be doing on the day the emergency arrives. Here is what most people get backwards. The person who keeps everything invested and nothing liquid is not more financially sophisticated. They are simply one bad week away from making a financial decision under conditions that were never designed for good decisions. The person with 6 months in the bank has already solved that problem in advance, before the bad week arrived, before the urgency, before the arithmetic became something that had to be done quickly with options that weren't ideal. An emergency fund is not savings. It is the price of sleeping without calculating what would break first if the paycheck suddenly and without warning stopped. And the person who paid that price, who kept that money liquid through every single market rally, every conversation about returns, every year it sat quietly earning less than it theoretically could have, every well-meaning suggestion to put it to work somewhere more productive, is not behind. They simply decided, in quiet advance, that the cost of not having it would always be higher than the cost of keeping it. There is a moment people who always have 6 months in the bank all describe in almost the same way. It is not the day they reached the number. It is not the first time they needed it. It is an ordinary Tuesday, reading about layoffs at a company in a different industry, or hearing that a friend is managing a difficult month and feeling something close to nothing complicated. Not relief, not pride, just the quiet, complete absence of the low-level calculation that used to run in the background of every financial decision. The one that started with, but what if something goes wrong? Not because nothing can go wrong, because the answer to that question was already decided a long time ago and has been sitting in an account ever since, waiting patiently for a question that may never come. The 6 months was never about the money. It was about what having it meant you never had to become. 10 years from now, nobody asks what return your emergency fund earned. They ask whether you ever once made a financial decision from a position of desperation. Do you have 6 months in the bank, and has anyone ever made you feel like keeping it there was the wrong call? Drop it below. We read every single one.